Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi, tout le monde, et bienvenue.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome.
City Council for 2024. I would like to call this meeting to order.
Your worship, all public meetings of Moncton City Council are simultaneously translated. Hearing devices are available. If you have the right to address council in the official language of your choice. Meetings are also simulcast in both languages on the City of Moncton's YouTube channel and can be found on our website at moncton.ca. If you have registered with the city clerk's office prior to the agenda deadline, 7 days before the meeting, you will be given 5 minutes for your presentation. Other public presentations will be given 2 minutes. You will receive a reminder when 1 minute is remaining. Please note, no presenter shall speak disrespectful of council, staff, or a member of the general public. The use of offensive or profane language will not be tolerated. Any breach of this guideline may result in the presenter being asked to leave the council chambers at the discretion of the chair. Un service d'interprétation simultanée est offert durant une réunion. Vous avez
Simultaneous interpretation services are offered during all public meetings of Moncton City Council. Hearing devices are available at the back of the room. You have the right to address council in the official language of your choice. Meetings are streamed in both languages on the City of Moncton's YouTube channel and can be found on our website at moncton.ca. If you've registered with the city clerk's office prior to the agenda being published 7 days before the meeting, you will be given 5 minutes for your presentation. Other public presentations will be given 2 minutes. Please note that no presenter shall speak disrespectfully of council, staff, or a member of the general public. The use of offensive or profane language shall not be tolerated. Any breach of this guideline may result in the presenter being asked to leave the council chambers at the discretion of the chair. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk.
To move our agenda for today. Thank you, Councillor Kingston, seconded by Councillor Edgett. But Councillor Richard, do you have something to add?
Sorry, this is for the agenda, sorry.
Yeah, it's for the agenda. On the agenda, on the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Next would be conflict of interest, les déclarations des conflits d'intérêts.
Are there any conflicts of interest? I do not see any. I think we're good.
Okay. Next would be adoption of minutes. And we have 4 sets to adopt today. September 16th, October 7th, October 21st, and November 4th.
Thank you. Councillor Richard, I think you have something on this.
Yeah, I can move those minutes, but there would be some stuff to fix. In August 19, it shows that it doesn't show me present when I was virtual, but Councillor Crossman shows up twice. And in the June 17th minutes, Councillor Leger shows up twice, and I was in person. It's not showing. So those could be amended. I will move as.
Okay, wonderful. Is there a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Steves. Any questions on the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Next would be consent agenda, les questions soumises à l'approbation du Conseil. Une exemption à l'arrêté concernant les bruits excessifs, l'Université de
Exemption noise bylaw, University of Moncton, January 17th, 2025.
Yes.
First and seconded thing. Okay, Councillor LeBlanc, I'm assuming you wish to move this? Okay, we're going to go to the voting panel, which I've been forgetting to do.
Me too.
So Councillor LeBlanc, you wish to move it. Councillor Bourgeois, do you wish to second it? Okay, thank you. I'd ask you to indicate on your screen, please. Terrific, thank you. Okay, Councillor Bourgeois, go ahead.
Si, Madame la Maire, je veux juste savoir, est-ce qu'il y a une façon...
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to know, is there a way of measuring during the amount of volume during sound checks to make sure that volume is no issue for anybody, whether it is for this item or any other activity during the year?
Vous juste répéter la question? Désolée.
Could you please Ask your question again.
Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter la
Could
question?
you please rephrase your question? We have a municipal bylaw concerning noise. We haven't decided how many decibels are considered acceptable. I don't know how this is agreed on, but we know that such an event is scheduled. Usually there's sound checks happening. So maybe we could measure the volume of such event during the sound check phase. Do we have the required tools for that? Is there any way of doing more prevention than trying to find a cure for any event, whether it be at the Avenir Center or Aberdeen Center, to make sure that it won't bother neighbors because it's in adherence to the noise bylaw? Yes, we can make sure that all municipal agents have the required devices to measure the amount of volume. In this case, it is not a music show. It's not a live music show. It's more of a recorded music show,
De l'esplanade, donc
and it will be held within the confines of the Esplanade. So it will be sheltered by buildings. So it's not completely out in the open, as in a field. But for sure, we can double check with the bylaw officers to make sure that this is complied with. Well, if we don't have the required equipment, maybe we should consider looking into obtaining it, because there's no use having a noise bylaw if we have no way of implementing it and ensuring compliance. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Please indicate on your screens. Terrific. Thank you.
One nay vote, Counselor Steves. The next would be public presentations, and this evening we have one public presentation, and it's Susan Trites to discuss menorah and manger at City Hall.
Susan, if you could just press your microphone, there's a little light at the, just right at the base of your microphone. Terrific, thank you. You're live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Arnold and Council. My name is Suzanne Trice. As you know, I am the New Brunswick representative for the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem Canada team. First and foremost, I want to apologize for never thanking you for setting up Angels, the Manger, and the Menorah on city grounds. I have watched every year as I worked across the street at ACOA to see if they went up every December. And faithfully, they went up. And I would silently thank our city for continuing to display these meaningful symbols for both the Christian and Jewish faiths when many municipalities chose not to. Because of what we went through last year, and especially because of what we went through last year, I thank you, each one of you, for doing the right thing again this year. And I apologize that it took me this long to stand before you and extend my gratitude. Last month, for Holocaust Education Month, the synagogue organized a presentation and exhibit on the Holocaust by Jasmine Cronat. Thank you, Mayor Arnold and Councilman Butler, for attending this very important event in support of the Jewish community. Jasmine is a founder of the Atlantic Canada Holocaust Education Foundation. I am thankful that in January of this year, our province announced a partnership with Jasmine's foundation to develop tools and resources for teaching about the Holocaust, aiming to provide students with strong and tangible learning experiences about this sobering historical event. Jasmine, a hate crime survivor herself, tirelessly goes into the schools and, using her incredible exhibit, educates high school students on the Holocaust and, as a result, exposes anti-Semitism. To date, 4 high schools have had the privilege to see this exhibit. It is imperative that this number grow in the coming year. At the exhibit I attended, Jasmine told us many high school students have never heard about the Holocaust. Both Mayor Arnold and myself, in conversing, were shocked at this alarming fact. While I realize the mandate for the education curriculum in our local schools lies within the responsibility of the province, I wanted to take a moment to show you Jasmine's newly co-authored book on bearing witness on anti-Semitism. This book is about anti-Jewish hate, bomb threats of Jewish organizations harassing Jewish students in schools, vandalizing Jewish businesses. This book will give teachers a window to explore anti-Semitism, thought-provoking poetry, lesson plans to teach anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust through poetry. Jasmine wrote the Guide for Educators section of this book. It came out last month. I wanted you, Mayor and Council, to be aware of this important tool and perhaps promote it in your associations and the people who cross your path that are involved in the education sector. Finally, 40 mayors and council of Canadian cities have made a proclamation, including prominent cities like Calgary, Toronto, and Ottawa, to declare the month of December Christian Heritage Month. Statistics Canada's 2021 Census of Population deemed Christianity the largest religion in Canada. The month of December marks significant events and celebration in the Christian calendar, from the beginning of Advent to the celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. To date, there are no cities on this list from Atlantic Canada, not one. Would it not be an honor, Mayor Arnold and Council, to be the first city in our region to make this official proclamation? As a Christian and a person of the Christian community, I ask you to genuinely consider this. Finally, this year, the first day of Hanukkah, a Jewish celebration remembering a critical time in Jewish history, approximately 600 years BC, resulting in the miracle of light, and therefore is remembered by the lighting of the menorah, falls on Christmas Day. This is the first time in 19 years. So having both the menorah and the manger once again on our city grounds symbolizes the unity of both faiths this year. As Jewish families celebrate Hanukkah in Israel and around the world, 101 hostages, living or not living, remain in Gaza as they enter the 438th day in captivity. So as I wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas and only God's richest blessings over you, your family, and our community in 2025. My greatest prayers for those 101 to be liberated and return to their families and nations as soon as possible. Having been in Israel in October on a solidarity tour, I saw the weightiness of this on the hearts of the people in the nation of Israel. Thank you.
Councillor Bourgeois.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. My question is to the city manager. Where are we with the policy regarding the exhibition of religious symbols on city property?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bourgeois. The consultation has begun with the different religious groups. As per presented, I believe it was late November, I believe, when we presented our action plan, with the idea that in January that those results would be shared with a draft policy on the exhibition of religious symbols on city lands.
So January-ish?
January-ish, yes.
Thank you very much. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
The next item is administration presentation, les exposés de l'administration. And this evening, we have an update from the RCMP, Superintendent Benoit Jolet.
Bon après-midi tout le monde. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone.
As always, I'm going to go through a list of some of the highlights that since I last reported to council. First of all, regarding community policing, this time of year, as you can imagine, all of our members and specifically the community policing unit are out there doing a variety of different things. So unfortunately, this year's Santa Claus Parade was canceled due to poor weather, and I'm happy that it was canceled because the trees were bending sideways. With The managers of the parade organizers really managed to pull off a Christmas miracle because they rescheduled for December 1st at the Moncton Coliseum. Our community policing unit was out there and had initially planned to lead the food drive during the parade, but did the same thing at the Coliseum on December 1st. And I'm really ecstatic at the turnout and also the generosity of the individuals and the families that were there. We were able to raise 1,200 pounds of food and over $800 in cash donations benefiting the Peter McKee Center. So I'm also extremely proud of the community policing unit because we also held 3 Stuff PC events one in each of the 3 communities over the last couple weeks. One on December 3rd, the 10th, and the 12th, and nearly $5,000 in cash donations, and over 1,500 pounds of food was collected. So the Moncton event that was held at the Sobeys on Von Harvey, again, was in support of the Peter McKee Center. So I'd like to thank the 3 food banks in the Kodiak area for their dedicated work year-round, and also for the generosity of residents. And also remind residents that supporting the food banks is essential, not only at Christmas time or pre-Christmas time, but all year round to help families who are struggling to make ends meet. Just this past Friday on December 13th, myself and several members and employees of Kodiak RCMP had the privilege of attending Boar Park, where family, friends, and elected officials were present to honor the memory of Corporal Oren Bourgeois and Constable Mike O'Leary, who were killed 50 years ago while selflessly attempting to locate a missing individual. So we're no stranger to tragedy, and having lived through our own horrific event in 2014, and my sincere condolences to the families, friends of our heroes and all Monctonians. A special thanks to Councillor Butler for his presentation at the ceremony. Next, regarding our crime reduction unit. So, as I've mentioned to council in the past, our crime reduction unit focuses on individuals who cause the most harm in the community. And we also have across New Brunswick a integrated enforcement unit. They concentrate just on drug enforcement. We have a 4-member team at Kodiak. 2 are Justice Public Safety officers and 2 are RCMP members that are funded solely by the province. In May of this year, a joint operation was started with the Toronto Police Service. And the investigation was regarding drug supply and a distribution network. So during the course of the investigation, it was learned that a Toronto crime group had set up a distribution hub in New Brunswick, mainly the Kodiak region. And they were supplying numerous kilogram level to individuals in our area. So we corroborated this information and started intel sharing with our partners, specifically with the Toronto Police Service. And just this last week on December 11th, we finally were able to arrest the individuals and seize a multitude of vehicles. And it was extremely complicated, and due to the observations and information that we had obtained, the vehicles that were seized were actually passed through an X-ray device that our explosive disposal unit has to check for concealed hidden compartments. So a total of the items that were seized during this operation was 13 kilograms of cocaine, 7 firearms and ammunition, various vehicles, some high-end, and several bundles of cash estimated over $200,000. During the investigation, 2 men from Toronto, a male and a female from Dieppe, were arrested and are facing a large amount of charges. So the project's a testament to our continued dedication to drug enforcement in our community. And it speaks also to the amazing work that's done at Kodiak RCMP, but specifically with our partners within New Brunswick and across Canada. And we believe that a significant network of drug importation into the Kodiak area was disrupted. There will be a follow-up media on this either tomorrow or early next week. Another update that I'd like to share, and it's the reason I'm sharing it, it's to show council and also residents that even if things happen several years ago. We never stopped working on some of these files. Here's one example, June of 2023. Our sergeant that's in charge of our general investigations section was reviewing a file and came upon a warrant of arrest that had been issued 5 years ago in 2019 regarding a child sexual assault. Considering the seriousness of the offense and that no specific actions had been taken to locate this individual, we deployed resources on this file to attempt to locate the individual. Being unsuccessful in this area, we crafted a media release in May of this year and got a hit in Waterloo, Ontario, where the family members provided information where this individual was possibly located. We partnered with Waterloo Police Service, and the individual was located, arrested, and remanded into custody. And this past November 22nd, 2 of our members traveled to Waterloo to transfer the remanded individual back to Moncton here so he could face charges on this offense dating back to 2019. So sexual offense crimes, especially towards children, are extremely complicated, complex, takes a lot of work, and devastating for the victims and their families. And we were able, with our partners in Waterloo, to provide some sort of closure to the victims in this crime. Next, regarding our patrol team, some of the events that have happened since I last reported to the council. On November 22nd, we responded to an attempt robbery complaint regarding a firearm. This actually started in Dieppe. 3 suspects had fled the scene, and through the investigation, it was learned that a firearm had been discharged. Once we did meet with the victim, they did have minor injuries, but not from the discharged firearm. And we were able to identify the suspects immediately. And a short time later, we located their vehicle, and it ended up being involved in a collision in Fairview Knoll Park. At that incident, we were able to put 3 individuals into custody: a 29-year-old man from a 29-year-old man, a 33-year-old, and a 34-year-old man. 1 was released on conditions, but 2 were remanded into custody and are scheduled to return to court at a later date in 2025. On December 4th, Kodiak Patrol responded to an armed robbery at Sobeys on Von Harvey. I'm really proud of the staff there because they immediately called us and they didn't try to intervene. And when our patrol members arrived, they had the video footage ready to go. And within minutes, we were able to locate the 2 individuals and take them into custody, a male and a female, and lay various charges on these individuals. And again, no one was hurt. Our businesses are getting better and better and amazing to work with when crimes are reported, whether it's a shoplifting or a major offense. The video surveillance in these stores is quite unbelievable, and we've developed a really good relationship with these businesses. Yesterday evening and until the early hours of the morning, our patrol members were called to a horrific collision on Highway 15 just outside of Moncton, between Harrisville and the traffic circle. So we're still investigating the incident. However, the highway was closed for several hours. And I'd really like to thank the residents for their patience and cooperation in letting first responders do their work. There were several injuries and fatalities, and I'll be able to update council at a later date. I'm meeting with the team tonight at 8 o'clock who was working last night, just to see how they are. But I'd like to thank them, but also all the first responders and everybody that assisted us with the call for service yesterday. Next, with the holiday season upon us, I'd like to remind all residents of the dangers of impaired driving. As we get together with family, friends, and coworkers, let's all do our part to ensure everyone gets home safe. Our patrol members will be out, regardless if it's a weekday, weekend, or weekday during the day, and looking for individuals who are driving impaired and conducting impaired driving blitzes. So it's great to have fun, but please make smart decisions and watch over one another. And finally, I'd like to advise council that New Brunswick RCMP has named a new commanding officer. Newly promoted Assistant Commissioner Matko Sirotic was named last week. He's the former officer in charge of specialized policing for New Brunswick and looks forward to continue to deliver quality leadership for the New Brunswick RCMP. And once he's been briefed up in 2025, I'm sure he'd love to pay Moncton Council a visit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crossman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Superintendent, thank you for the presentation. I do have one question. How much of a role did the Moncton RCMP, Greater Moncton RCMP play in the point in time count that was done a few weeks ago? Because we had nonprofits here tell us that it was being done. So I'm curious to know how much of a role our policing played in that.
I don't have the information with me here, Councillor Crossman, but I could easily get that for you.
Okay, what I'm looking for is the RCMP's involvement in that exact point in time count. And possibly, you know, if there was any infractions or any, I don't know, warrants that were out for arrest that happened to transpire within that point in time count, drug seizures, things along that line. That's the information that I'm hoping you can provide.
Absolutely, I'll get that.
Good, thank you, Your Worship.
I don't see any other questions at this time. Thank you, as always, Superintendent, for being here with us, and happy holidays to you and your team.
Likewise to Moncton Council and all staff and residents. Happy holidays to everybody.
Next is planning matters. Le premier ce soir, c'est une audience publique de raison.
First off, tonight, rezoning hearing for T-Berry Avenue.
Nope. How do I switch the slides? It just happened. Oh, I swipe. Okay, thank you. So this is a housekeeping application, and it's just to swap the zoning on two properties to reflect the true use of the lands. One being a residential building lot, and the other being a public trail that provides access to the Northwest Trail off of T-Berry Avenue. The application involves rezoning a portion of 197 to 199 T-Berry Avenue from P1, which is community use, to R2, two-unit dwelling, and PID 70704416 from R2, two-unit dwelling, to P1, community use. So the subject land is located in the north end of Moncton, and that is in Ward 3. So these two properties were part of an overall master planned area that was rezoned in 2018 as a mixed density neighborhood. At that time, the trail network was identified throughout the neighborhood, and it would connect to the Northwest Trail. So in anticipation of this, those identified trails were rezoned at that time to P1, community use, through that master planning process and the rezoning application. But then as the neighborhood developed and the streets and the building lots were created, the location of this LFPP in this one small area, it was realigned by a few meters to just create or accommodate a more efficient building lot fabric. So the LFPP was therefore actually taken in a different location than originally planned, but then the zoning layer was never amended to reflect where that LFPP was moved to. So currently, as we can see in the two images on the right, there is a strip of P1 zoned land through the middle of an R2 zoned property, and the portion of the public trail where it connects to the Northwest Trail is zoned R2. So this application just proposes to switch those zones to reflect the true sense, the true use of the lands. At its meeting of November 27th, 2024, the Planning Advisory Committee considered the proposed amendment and voted unanimously to recommend that City Council approve the amendment application. And so the recommendation is that Moncton City Council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z222.41 and Schedule A41 to rezone a portion of 197 to 199 T-Berry Avenue from P1 to R2 and PID 70704416 from R2 to P1. And that is it. Happy to
Terrific. Thank you very much, Sarah. Now, we are in a public hearings, but my understanding is there have been no objections. I would ask if there's anyone who has an objection or a proponent who wishes to speak to identify themselves. Once, twice, okay. I don't think there's anything more. At this time, Council, do you have any specific questions about this public hearing? First up is Councillor Steves. Go ahead.
I'd just like to move it.
Oh, okay. Then I'll go to you, Councillor Bourgeois.
I'll let Councillor Butler seconded if you want, but I have a question.
Yeah, so we're in a public hearing, so this is the time. Ask a
Okay.
question. Yeah.
I just want to know what rationale we should look at as council. You said the location of the LFPP trail was realigned to accommodate a more efficient building lot fabric. Not quite sure what that means. Could you translate it in lay terms? Does it mean we can build more lots than the previous?
So what
Zoning?
happened was this neighborhood is building out almost exclusively with semi-detached homes. And so that lot on the corner, once they actually, put in the street and started subdividing and looking at lot frontages and lot sizes, realized that there would be a small little lot and then the LFPP and then another small little lot. And so it just made sense to allow to move that trail. It was reviewed by our Parks Department. They had no issues with that. They looked at sight lines. They looked at just in terms of safety of crossing in that new location, and everything was fine. And so nobody had any issues with it. And so that was why it was approved.
So the answer is yes. We have more lots if we do this than if we stayed with the current?
We would have, I guess with the current, we would have had maybe 2 singles as opposed to 1 semi-detached.
Yeah, okay, so, anyways. If that's the case, if we sort of, instead of splitting one lot into 3 chunks, a small chunk, and the trail in between, we move it, and then that may allow for another house to be built in the lot. If that's the case, I can understand, everybody's happy, no opposition. But I'm looking at the map, and anybody who would use that trail today is going straight through to the big part of it would be the wires, but you can walk on, but also to traverse to the other section of LFPP. But now they have to zigzag a little bit. Not the end of the world. It gives you more exercise if you're on the trails anyways. But when this is a more efficient building lot fabric is on the one side, but if who protects the citizens? Who says, you know what, it'd be better not for the development, but it'd be better for the citizens who use the trails to have a straight path rather than a zigzag. Does anybody take a look at that?
Definitely. The Parks Department did look at that. That was brought up. And basically there were 2 things. First of all, by moving it to the current location, it does cost less. It's less LFPP that has to be taken. So the trail itself isn't as long, I guess. The other part in terms of safety, they mentioned that a lot of times kids, if it's a straight shot, they're just gonna go. And so it's on a corner. And so that may not always necessarily be the safest. By making them come out, move a little bit, however many meters to the right, and then cross, it gives people pause to look and then cross the street.
Thank you. Well, that's all I wanted to, as long as somebody considers from the citizen's perspective. Thank you very much. Merci, Madame la Maire.
If there are no other questions at this time, I will declare this public hearing adjourned, and I'll go back to you, Councillor Steves. Do you wish to move it? Thank you. And Councillor Butler, you wish to second it? Could we pull up that page, please? Thank you. And I don't see any other questions. I think we can go right to the vote. Terrific, thank you. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Next is a public hearing on indexing of development charges by law for 2025. And I believe Josh Davies is here to provide an overview.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. And so as mentioned, this is the public hearing for the development charge bylaw indexing for 2024 into fees for 2025. Next slide. Yep. So as council is aware, development charges may be indexed annually to account for increasing construction costs. The city of Moncton is fortunate to have its own building price index, which is for non-residential construction, specifically for Moncton, and that is brought through from Statistics Canada. The index rate for 2024 is 5.1%. So we're starting to see a decrease, as we mentioned in the introduction, in the rise. I believe in previous years we were over 10%. So it's a good sign that for this year the increase is 5.1%. In comparison to what we were dealing with in 2023. This item went to the Planning Advisory Committee for its written views, and it provided its views unanimously in support at its November meeting. To just provide again that visual context of what we're looking at here is the development charges. We have currently 7 within the city of Moncton with future ones to come, including the Vision Lands. But for now, we're dealing with these 7. There are existing charge areas that were created under previous legislation. They do not get indexed, but the 7 development charge areas that are incorporated in the development charge bylaw would be eligible for that 5.1% increase. And in terms of our, before I get to the recommendation, we did surface a communication with Canada Post being down. We were able to contact our list of builders and our list of developers in the city to advise of this change and for the development charge bylaw and for the fees and charge bylaw as well, to make sure that we were getting the word out. And we were also fortunate, Bill and I both participated in construction events regionally, and were able to kind of put the good word out there as well. So we were able to, despite the I guess the challenges of notice, we were able to kind of to get the message out to the development community, and we haven't received any opposition or feedback to date. And ultimately, through our recommendation that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council give second and third readings to bylaw Z-1519.4, being the development charge bylaw. And in terms of next steps, as this is under the Community Planning Act, this will get sent through to the province if approved to the for ministerial approval. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Terrific. Thank you, Josh. So yes, we are in a public hearing. So I would ask if there is anyone who objects to this or wants to support it, they could come forward. I don't think there are any. We've certainly not received any. Are there questions from council at this time? Seeing none, I will declare this public hearing adjourned. And Councillor Kingston, do you wish to move this?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for it? Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I'd ask that you'd indicate on your screen the mover and the seconder. Thank you. Terrific. Any questions? All right, we can move to the vote. Excellent, thank you. And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Josh. And I bet you're up next.
I am.
The next is a public hearing for fees and charges, bylaw A 1324.2.
Yeah, so this is the second of, I guess we could call it 2 administrative bylaws from planning tonight. This is again the public hearing for the update to the fees and charges bylaw. So to set the context, this bylaw is separated into 2 parts, being Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix B is the portion of the bylaw that contains planning fees. So unlike Appendix A, which are set through Local Governance Act, the planning related fees are set and are subject to the requirements of the Community Planning Act. So it's similar to going through a rezoning in terms of the process and what we need to do in terms of an introduction, Planning Advisory Committee, and ultimately a public hearing. So what we ended up with was a Planning Advisory Committee, again, supporting unanimously to provide its written views and support at the November meeting. And this year, again, is a 2.5% increase for the planning fees in 2025, which is consistent with the increases that we've seen in the past few years. So this just provides council with a visual in terms of what the fees are today in 2024. And again, applying that 2.5% increase to 2025 to give a bit of a visual and to sort of see what that 2.5% increase does mean for the fees relating to planning next year. So again, similar to what we had done through the communication to the development community on the development charge amendment, this went through again to the development community and was made sure that we were able to get the message out as best we could. Again, no opposition or no letters of opposition were received. So ultimately, administration recommends that council give second and third readings to bylaw A-1324.2, a bylaw respecting fees, rates, and charges for services provided by the City of Moncton. And secondly, the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council give second and third readings to bylaw A-1324.2, Appendix B, a bylaw respecting fees, rates, and charges for services provided by the City of Moncton. And similar to the development charge amendment, if approved, we would be sending this to the province for approval in order to enact for January of next year. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. And again, we are in a public hearing. I would ask if there is anyone who objects to this or wants to support it in some way and wishes to speak. I do not see anyone. We have not heard of any objections. So I will declare this public hearing adjourned and would ask for a mover and seconder for this. Is there anyone who wishes to move? Thank you, Councillor Legier, seconded by Councillor Edgett. If we could go to the page to do that, please. Thank you. Any questions? All right, we may move to the vote. Excellent, thank you. And motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's it for planning matters. Thank you, Josh.
Next, Your Worship, is statements from members of council. Les exposés des membres du conseil.
I have Councillor Bourgeois. Go ahead.
Happy holidays to everyone. Merci.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights on. I think we can carry on.
Next is recommendations and reports and recommendations from committee and private meetings, rapport de recommandation des comités et des réunions à huis clos. And the first up this evening is 9.1 recommendations from the private session of December 9th, 2024. There are two recommendations that are coming out of this meeting. The first is regarding Canada Games, and the motion is quite long. Council has it in their package. The media has been provided the recommendation, as well as it'll be on our website within 48 hours with the decisions of council. Therefore, I'm not going to read the entire recommendation as long as council is okay with that.
Yes.
Okay. So I will read the backgrounder on it. I'm a little slow here as it's so long. Here we go. The backgrounder is that the Canada Games is the largest amateur multi-sport event for top young athletes in Canada and features 2 weeks of competition across 16 to 20 sports. Approximately 4,600 participants, athletes, coaches, and managers participate in the event, which is supported by over 5,000 volunteers. Hosting these games offers significant benefits to a community, example, investments in new and improved sporting infrastructures and substantial economic impacts. So I
Terrific.
need a vote.
I need a mover for this. And Councillor Butler, did you wish to move it? Okay, is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I'd ask that, what's going on there?
You hit, wow.
Sorry, I must have hit
Right.
the wrong button. I'm sorry.
Fix it.
I get the mover and seconder to indicate on the screen, please.
Just 1 second.
You're gonna have to do it again. Sorry. There.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, it's done?
Councillor Butler, Councillor LeBlanc.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for the team for putting all this together. This is awesome. It's going to be great for the city and the whole, I would say, the greater Moncton area, which is really great. I hope that our neighboring communities jump on board and help us out all they can, even financially would be great. If maybe somebody could just, so when this goes online, I'm sure somebody's going to be asking this question. So in the sheet of paper we have, number 9, it says, subject to the creation of a new facility or the renovation of an existing facility. Somebody explain to me what, just in case somebody asks me that question, what this is about. I know we talked about it in private, but I'd like to know if you could have it on. Number 9. Noof.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Counselor, you're just asking whether there's going to be new facilities or renovations of existing facilities?
Well, yes, I guess, so are these, if there's any renovations, I guess my question is that, are they going to be just for, I don't see it getting any new facility, but the renovations of existing, are they going to be Moncton-owned facilities?
So at this point, where we're at in the process is that we're looking to submit the bid by the end of January.
Mhm.
Once the evaluation is made and should we be given the hosting opportunities for the games in March, then there is a host society that is created. The host society will then work with the communities to decide which facilities will be in play, I guess, at this point in time.
So you're saying that we're going to vote on this tonight and we actually don't know, we have no idea, like, is this, what I'm asking is this city-owned facilities that are going to be renovated?
Yes, these would all be city-owned facilities that would be renovated.
All right, thank you, Your Worship.
The list will be known should we get the hosting rights to the games.
Thank you, thank you.
Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la Maire. I'm okay with not reading the 1.5 pages of resolutions, but did I misunderstand or did we skip over the 3rd paragraph of the backgrounder? Which I think is very important.
Yeah, I would agree. Madame Lagraffière, can you read the 3rd paragraph of the backgrounder? Oh. It's not in hers. Oh,
Sorry.
there you go. You can read mine.
Thank you. Yes, I will read that. That the 2029 Games, Canada Games Bid Committee has submitted their request to Moncton City Council for operational funding support up to $2 million, as well as a capital funding commitment of $1.5 million. The joint resolution with the Funday Regional Service Commissions outlines the New Brunswick host community's commitment to the 2029 Games. Yes, that's very good.
So in a nutshell, for those who can't read this online or whatever, it's $3.5 million that the city is committing to we are promising in our bid to invest 3.5 million, almost half in capital, half in operational, plus in kind, if we get it. Thank you. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Any other questions? Seeing none on the question, we can go to the vote. Excellent, thank you. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
The next would be, the second one is that Moncton City Council approve the agreement drafted to provide an advance to the Rising Tide for $720,000, and that Moncton City Council permit the city to release the funds before December 12th to meet Rising Tide's deadline provided. And that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to execute and affix the corporate seal of the city of Moncton to grant payment agreement and any documentation related thereto. And the background is Rising Tide has recently entered a bid to purchase 1010 St. George Street, being the former Wamanisa Insurance Facility. The intent is to repurpose the building for 36 affordable senior housing units on top 2 floors, with a potential option of using the first floor space for a seniors facility. The 720,000 advance is the amount Rising Tide would be eligible to receive as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund once the project is complete, and this advance will permit Rising Tide to purchase the property.
Terrific, thank you. Is there someone who wishes to move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Legere, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. I would ask that you indicate on your screens. Thank you. Questions? I see no questions. I think we can go to the vote. All those in favor indicate on your screen, or contrary minded. Thank you. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Next is reports from administration, les rapports de l'administration. Le premier, c'est une audience publique, impôt de la ZAA.
The first is a public hearing, a BIA levy.
Yes, please.
Okay. Motion that Moncton City Council approve the Downtown Moncton Centre-Ville Inc. proposed levy for the year 2025 in the amount of $961,749. That the proposed budget, when published, established the special levy rate for 2025 at 16 cents on $100 of assessment based on projected data, 2025 assessments, and that Moncton City Council gives second and third reading to bylaw A 1002.24.
Terrific. I don't remember doing this in the past, but we are in a public hearing. So if there is, we're not aware of any objectors to this, no objections at all. So if there is any, please speak now. All right, I don't see any. I think I will declare this public hearing closed, and I would take a motion to support. Thank you, Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Kingston. I'd ask that you'd indicate on your screen. Thank you. Any questions? All right, we can go right to the vote. Thank you. And the BIA levy for this year passes unanimously. Thank you.
Next is DMCI funding, and the motion before council is that Moncton City Council approve the request for DMCI to cover the additional cost of the Enviro program up to a maximum of $134,633, where $50,396.09 can be paid immediately, and the remaining amount be paid once DMCI's December 2024 statements are finalized. And the final shortfall number is known, and that the amount is funded from the 2024 operating fund surplus, and that DMCI and administration returned by the end of February 2025 to provide a clear picture of how the program will operate in 2025, summarizing the improvement made to DMCI's administrative and governance process, and to provide council a clear picture of whether DMCI has enough funds for the 2025 Enviro program.
Terrific. Thank you. Councillor Legier, do you wish to move this recommendation?
Yes, I would move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for it? Councillor LeBlanc, I would ask that you indicate on your screens. Excellent. Thank you. Questions? I don't see any. On the question? All those in favor indicate on your screen. I don't know what just happened there.
When I thought that it was unanimous.
It was a unanimous vote. Thank you.
The next is a presentation, Community Grants Funding 2025, and I believe that Mr. Greg Hauser is here to provide that update.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no, you were on. And now you're on again.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for having us here tonight. Before we start the presentation, walk through the grants and the allocations of grant funding, I'd like to sort of acknowledge those members who are on the committee who worked tirelessly looking at the applications from the different organizations and worked through, scored them, discussed them, and most of the members are able to be here tonight. So beside me, who will share the presentation, is Connor Woods. I've got Monique Richard there, basically Tina Smith, Jenny Pham wasn't able to make it, and then internal members, I have Joanne Duguay, Alicia Grayab, who's recovering from a breaking her ankle, so she was probably listening in online, myself, and then there was two councillors on the committee, Councillor Kingston, Councillor Steves, who provided great insight and feedback and acknowledgement of as we went through the process. So basically, we'd like to go through a couple things first, go through a little bit of history, a little bit of background, and then more specifically, Connor can help address and help work through the amounts that were allocated and awarded to the organizations. So basically, it goes through. So basically, the topics we're going to talk about is the grant structure overview, the best practice review that we administration along with council went through over the last couple of years, a little bit about the grant evaluation committee, and then more specifically about the community awards based on the budget that was already deliberated and approved by council in November. So as council is aware, there's a variety of grants provided to citizens, residents, and organizations. So basically supports community organizations, operational grants. That's really what we're going to be speaking about tonight in more detail. Core grants, things like the library, Capitol Theatre, Moncton Industrial, Regional Service Commission, Ability Transit, are really organizations that provide, in essence, services to us and are approved generally through the normal operating budget on their own. Other grants that aren't in the context we're talking about today are things like heritage preservation grants, so that's within the urban planning area, and they support heritage buildings. And we have the downtown core infrastructure, which is an economic development grant to incent and support downtown growth, and we've had a lot of success with that grant in the past and continues to help fill in and grow the downtown. So as you may recall, over the last number of years, I mentioned we had the best practice review and approved changes from council. A little bit of history. The objectives of that review when we first started it, and it came out of basically the 2022 budget discussions, was really make the community grant process easier for applicants, equitable and unbiased, and objective and basically transparent. So it was very clear how the process worked and that organizations were be able to demonstrate an application, what they basically needed, how they provided basic support to the city and what their causes were. Funds would be aligned to the strategic plan, so the pillars of the strategic plan. Ensure the grant budget is cost effective and predictable, so there's some predictability for organizations. And importantly, less pressure on councils to support specific groups and limit lobbying and influence over decisions. Through the process, 17 cities were reviewed across Canada. 5 cities what we felt was best in class cities, including Ottawa, London, Regina, Halifax, and St. John, had detailed interviews and surveyed and provided us with a significant amount of feedback on a variety of categories such as the application, review, the awarding, reporting, budgeting, and timing of the process. We also, as part of the process, reached out to local community organizations. We had sent 104 surveys out to organizations, 48 which responded, so almost 50% of those organizations responded with feedback on the changes were proposed, ideas, and so it was sort of circled not only outside of our city, but within the city for those groups and how the process should work down the road. So some of the changes that came about as a result of those best practice studies is basically enhanced overall policy umbrella, so change the policy. It's come to council and finalized in July of 2024. Talking about ineligibility and eligibility of organizations, ineligible expenses, the details, the application process, clear timelines, everybody applies on September 30th. There's only one application per organization per year, so you don't have organizations applying to 4 different streams, like a major multi-year or cultural. They apply in one and they can choose. And at times it may be, with administration can help and say, look, this is probably a better fit for your organization versus others. For major multi-year, they must have received grant funding in any of the categories for 3 of the last 5 years. The reason for that is to reflect that there has been a history, some sort of good working relationship with those organizations before they get a major multi-year grant, which would be at least a 3-year, either large dollar or a 3-year commitment. So I want to make sure those organizations have had some good, solid history with the city before getting major multi-year. And clear defined documentation. The applications was upgraded and enhanced. And basically, so there's details in that policy on separate grant streams and the rules for those grant streams. So the next thing was developed was basically a grant evaluation committee. So the composition of the committee that was agreed upon and approved by council was 2 councilors, 4 public members, and 3 administration, all of which I've introduced here a few minutes ago. There's a term of reference developed, and basically the decision process coming out of these changes was 1, approval of funds by council at deliberation, determination of the successful candidates based on the applications provided from the evaluation committee, communicate those allocations to council by December 15th, and in fact, December 16th today, and basically future outcome reporting. So what we're looking for, so the applications had significant amount of requests in there for, we need to see the outcomes, measurements, things like that as we move forward in order to provide council with feedback in the future that says, here's these organizations committed to do certain things and they've actually met those commitments, and those things can be reported back to council in the future. So a little bit of updates where the process was brought to council. In April 2022, we brought the outline of the best practice review and initial findings. A year later in 2023, had further updates, feedback from the community survey we did, and initial recommendations. In 2023, there was final recommendations, a policy process approval by council, so for all the recommendations I previously mentioned. And then July 2024, more of a housekeeping issue that hadn't been formally approved in December 23 was approved in July 2024. Basically, a little bit of the transition of the process. In April to July this year, we established members for the third-party committee. I'll explain that process in a minute. Application for the actual grants, community grants, went online on July 1st. Submission by groups deadline was September 30th. Basically, October 1st, December 1st, the committee evaluated through review of those various meetings, and basically coming here as presentation of that funding for 2025. So one more slide myself, and I'll pass it to Connor. So basically, as mentioned, the composition of the committee is 2 counselors, 4 community members, and 3 administration members. The application for the committee was an open application for community members. We actually had 24 applications received from the public. Great response. We didn't know at first how many there'd be. We had excellent engagement from the community on this one. It was scored based on community involvement, board experience, et cetera, for all the members around the committee and all those who applied. And then interviewed basically top 6 applicants, and then it was brought to the mayor for consideration and approval by council. And of the members, we have individuals dealing from accountants, HR, all have had some sort of funding experience, some sort of experience on boards and committees, so they understand and able to know the requirement for people to get funding and also understand the process a little bit. So I'll pass it on to Connor for his section, and then we'll add some questions at the end.
Good evening. As Greg mentioned, my name is Connor Woods. I'm one of the 4 members of the community on this committee. So just leading us through, as Greg mentioned, we have some expectations our committee laid out. So we reviewed the major multi-year grant applications in equitable and fair manner. Our applications had to meet all kind of criteria. And then our score was used on a score matrix. And then from there, we determined the grant award based on the funding available. So with the scored matrix, it was weighed out of 100 based on 4 weighted categories. So the first category was the alignment we see with the city strategic plan and the objectives laid out by council, the quality of community impact by the application, and ability to leverage partnerships and also cost sharing, and just the organization stability as well. So we kind of developed the score matrix from best practices of other communities and other organizations. Just a bit of a timeline here showing this committee. So we started here in September with some training sessions. So based on diversity, equity, and bias training. We move into a bit of the city's history and some of the grant overview and the budget. Moving into October, we reviewed the score matrix, the grant applications, and a high-level discussion with that. The grant questions, so on November 15th, we had a committee sit down. We talked about any questions or kind of a Q&A session, just leading up to the initial November 29th meeting where we sat down, scored everything, and had our funding discussions. And then now December 16th, presenting to council. So not on this is something that we're going to do in January. It's kind of meet along with this whole process. So as a committee, we'll kind of go through the ups and downs. Overall, this went really well, but there's always improvement that can be done. So that'll be discussed in January with the committee. So leading into the 2025 grant funding awards. Here you see what Greg mentioned, the kind of separation between the core grants and also the municipal operation grants. So near the top, it kind of shows a little bit of history with this, and then it outlines the 2025 budget. So out of that kind of operating budget includes major multi-year funding, the quality of life grant, cultural grant, and immigration grant. So this totals $2.22 million. Here's a closer up visual image. So it clearly shows the $2.22 million from the general operation grants. So community grant evaluation committee. So just kind of walking through the specific process. So we evaluate the organizations based on the content. So the grant application, the financial statements, the 2025 budget, the strategic plans, and also the impact reports they provided. We would have scored these independently using the score matrix and then tallied those up together as a committee. We valued the scores, provided a method of funding considerations based on the organization's requests. So the funding was, so the scores were established a baseline, so with the score matrix, and then kind of provided us some groundwork to talk about it and to kind of lay out these organizations and then have comments and discussions on that on top. So your appendix 2 and 3 would outline this, and it'll provide a summary of the organization's funding requests. and also our scoring committees and any other comments on that. So leading to the major multi-year grants, there's 22 major multi-year grant applications for the year 2025, totaling at a request of $1.2 million. So these applications, as mentioned, they're based on a scoring matrix and awarded based on their alignment with the city strategic plan and objectives, the quality of community impact, ability to leverage partnerships and cost sharing, and also their organizational stability. So the third bullet point here kind of shows that $2.02 million breakdown. So just over 1.1 million is ongoing grants that are already approved, and the $855,000 is the new grants that we received as a committee for 2025. So here's a visual list of those that have received funding in the past and will continue to receive so. So this makes up the $1.1 million that we just discussed. And this shows a visual representation of those new organizations that applied this year for 2025 funding. So these organizations would represent the $855,000. Add that to the 1.1 million that are getting carried over to the 2025 year, and that's a grand total of $2.02 million that will allocate towards organizations this upcoming year. Then moving into the quality of life grants. So 26 quality of life grant applications were received for a total request of $229,000. The applications were reviewed by administration and funding awarded based on the evaluation need, demonstrated partnership and community impact of these applications. With this, the quality of life grants totaling just over $83,000 and awarded for 19 organizations. Here's a chart of that breakdown. So a visual list of the 19 organizations and their awarded funding, totaling for just over $83,000. And this is on Appendix 4 as well. Moving forward to the cultural grants. For cultural grants, we had 40 cultural grant applications submitted for a total request of $333,000. These grants and applications were reviewed by administration and funded awarded based on the evaluation of the excellence, relevance, and feasibility, including the social return on investment and alignment to the 2016 to 2026 cultural plan laid out by the city. These cultural grants totaling $95,000 and awarded to 34 community organizations. With this, here's a visual breakdown of these 34 organizations and their awarded funding. This can also be seen on Appendix 5. Now moving into the immigration grants. 6 immigration grants have been submitted for a total request of $52,000. Applications were reviewed by administration and funding awarded based on the alignment with the Greater Moncton Immigration Strategy and strategic objectives. So with this, a total of $20,000 have been funded to 2 organizations. Here's a visual breakdown of that. And then as well noted, it's important to note that $5,000 will be held back to allocate throughout 2025 on an as-needed basis to requests that happen throughout that year, similar to what has been happening the last couple of years as well. And then further administration notes can be seen on Appendix 6. So with that, letters will be going out to all applicants who applied for the 2025 funding awards. Along with this is also a little letter that explains if any organizations that applied want any sort of feedback, they're welcome to, and administrative staff will reach out to kind of talk through that feedback as well. So that concludes that presentation. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Greg. I'm just wondering if the 2 councillors, did you have anything you wanted to add to the process? Go ahead, Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Madame Addis, and thank you, Connor and Greg and the committee. It was a real interesting committee to be on. And I think its time is warranted based on our population growth and the number of groups out there that have submitted or plan on submitting applications to the city. It's boggling the number that comes in. I mean, the major multi-year are locked in for a few years. They repeat, but the new groups that have come in are very worthy organizations looking for some sort of support. And I think the fact that we did independent scoring, each of us, and then met subsequent to that to review it was very, enlightening and quite an experience. So just kudos to the committee. And I think a time has arrived in our great city with our population to have a third-party outside committee do this work. And it was a lot of fun being on it. Continued success. Thank you very much. Merci, Madame Addis.
Thank you. Councillor Steves.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold. I'll echo some of Councillor Kingston's words. The process has improved again. I think that's what I want council to know most of all. The objectivity that was shown throughout the process. And I too thank the committee members. There's a lot of hours represented there. And ultimately, what I really like is that there's an answer for every line. And what I mean by that is the applicants that may be upset or disappointed in the percentage that they may be receiving, there's an answer as to why. And the leadership there would be happy to give them feedback on future applications. And I just like the fact that it's tangible and there's reasons for each line the way that it is. So thank you very much to the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Bourgeois, over to you.
Thank you, Madame la Maire. Thank you, committee members. This is not a fun task. It's picking and choosing and trying to figure out what's the best for our community. So I thank you for the time, for the thinking, as well as my colleagues on council. I agree. From my perspective, it's a great improvement over previous iterations of how we come up with, first of all, the amount of money to invest in our community, especially helping volunteer groups who are contributing to a quality of life for the most vulnerable. I can't imagine what our community, what our city would look like if it wasn't for all these volunteer groups providing so many hours of free time to improve our community. So they need help, and our community, through council, is ready, willing, and able to help. That said, I do have questions. Some on the CRF, and I think I only have one on the list, at the risk of opening the Pandora's box, but I hope it doesn't go there, but I do have a question. My first question is probably addressed to Jacques or Serge. The way, and maybe it was mentioned and I just didn't get it, but we, in terms of process times, we were expecting this discussion prior to the budget deliberations, or worst case scenario for the budget deliberations a month ago. It's not happened. Is there an explanation why we are receiving this now rather than during the budget deliberations, where we could have decreased or increased the budget for the grants?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Conseiller Bourgeois. So, I mean, when the group did the best practice review, that was one of the things that did come out of it, is that, and it is included in the policy, is that the amount is approved at budget time, adjusted for information, for inflation or so on, or if there are other known things. And then after that, the committee basically makes the recommendation to the process. In the future, if that is not the will of council, we can always make an amendment to the policy, but that is how it was presented.
I get it. We decide what piece of the pie we're going to give to grants, and then we divvy it up. But if there are extraordinary circumstances that we would decrease or increase, we can still do it then.
Yes, and even if we look at what was approved in 2024, if we look at the council contingency disbursements, there was one for Harvest House, there was one for Peter McKee, there was one, there were many, I believe there were a couple more. So that is the way that it's also the other way of being able to adjust on the fly, because when the committee receives those requests at that time, they treat all of those organizations fairly. They go through the same process, but we all recognize there will be some asks sometimes where council will have the ability to make a decision that will be able to support a not-for-profit organization based on the $1 million we put aside every year.
Right. But that begs the question whether or not it is a best practice if we have to correct it now versus a month ago. So anyways, you think about it, maybe for next year with the other feedback, and congratulations for asking the feedback. I don't think that's the best practice, but we'll revisit. Second question. Throughout the council report form, it says recommendations, 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 and that's how it was presented as well, as recommendations. But when we get to the recommendation of the council report form, the one that usually we make motions on, it says for information purposes only. So I'm confused as to, are these recommendations that council must approve? Or is that a done deal? And if it's a done deal, when did council give the committee the authority to spend this amount of money on those organizations? So I'm confused, unconfuse me.
I think in the CRF where there's comments about recommendations, those recommendations, ideally, unless there's a section I don't see, that those are recommendations that came from council as he went through that best process practice. And the recommendations are the ones from that best practice, such as establishing a third-party committee, such as establishing that council provides amount of funding to be allocated to these groups. And also part of that recommendation is that timing that you just spoke with Jacques about, was basically the budgets get approved by council, and then the committee, based on knowing how many funds are available for allocation, they come back with saying, here's based on the groups that applied, here's the allocation that we're awarding to, based on the money, keeping in context with what council approved as dollars available for grants.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong. The chronology on this is that we approved the policy, but we didn't have the best practices then and there, right?
Yes, we did. Yes, we
The
did.
best practices that says that we are going to let the committee decide how to spend the 2.2?
That is correct. The policy was the very last thing we did.
Okay. I'm not sure that's a best practice either. I don't like that. Because I have no say. We might have groups that will contact us and say, well, why did we not? I don't know. We don't have the explanation. I'm told that there's an explanation for each one. So hopefully we'll get that document. Am I missing something or?
No, and I think part of the process that Connor did mention is that any organization that would like feedback, letters will go out, any organization that would like feedback, actively ask and basically engage with them as to here's the feedback from your application, here's the positives of your application. A couple other things that happened that weren't even mentioned. Before the application even went out to organizations, there was a training session. There was an information training session last May that went through with all the organizations as to here's the process, here's the application, here's the important sections to fill out. I can't remember, there's probably 50 to 55 organizations that French and English engaged. Secondly, one of the things I know right now that's already been mentioned in the committee is to have another training session next year, because there were things on the applications that the committee saw they would like to see improved from both from the application and the organization responses to questions. So that's basically, so where it ends up.
Okay, now I come back to Jacques' answer earlier, where we can modify the list. So it is not for information purpose only. It is really recommendations, and we can go through the appendices and modify the amounts. Yes or no?
As per the policy, council would be able to add through a council contingency, But as per the policy right now, the recommendations of the council, that would be the authority that they would have to allocate the funds that were approved during budget. So you can add,
We can add, so we can't modify?
as per the policy, it would have, that would be the responsibility of the grants committee.
Okay, but I'm accountable to the city taxpayers and I have to explain why we give X amount of money to group A and Y amount of money to group B and everything else, and I can't. Because I'm not making a decision. We basically said, committee, here's 2.2 million. You decide how to divvy up. And if I disagree with it, there's no recourse for an elected member of council. That's what you're telling me.
So the, when doing the review and when looking at the other municipalities, the intent was to have a committee that has 2 members of councils, four from the public, 3 from administration, to look at and to go through some training, to go through with base criteria, to be able to score as it was done. It was done individually, then it was done with the team to be able to do. That is what is in the policy now. Policies can always change. If that's the will of council, that is certainly something that can be done, but the policy that is approved right now would be that process.
So just as we have a thick land use planning policies and bylaws and we modified them every single meeting. All right. All right. Now my question on the appendix 2. Very simple question, but I suspect that the answer might take a while, but why, and I'll just take one example, well, a few examples together, but there's one group that really suffered through this process, Community of Hope. Their funding year over year decreased by 1/3. Now they had, I think it was 37.5. They asked for 50,000 and the committee's recommending, is it 25,000? Yeah, 25,000. So they lost through this process 1/3 of their funding year over year, while 2 groups, Peter McKee Community Center and the United Way, more than doubled their grant, and other groups like Harvest House increased by 82.5%, and Danse Encore increased by 70%. I don't want to go into the details of why this group and that group, and this is the reason why, but from a tip of the iceberg city councilor perspective, knowing how, I guess, important the work of the Community of Hope does as much as the other ones, but why did some more than double year over year? Sure, they have other activities and they have more things to do, more clients, unfortunately, I guess, because these groups work with the most vulnerable and the most needy. So that makes sense. I'm not sure about Danse Encore because I don't know the details of their request. But Community of Hope losing 1/3 of their funding while other groups more than double does not make sense to me. So make it make sense.
I guess the first initial item is about the application. Every community organization applied with an application, a consistent application, and the committee with review of that application and what was within the application itself, including how they answered to how they address the pillars, how they have community impact or partnerships and financial. All those were considered that evolved with the score that we talked about. And in fact, so then basically based on the score, basically they were allocated their monies based on the score. So the ones objectively who had the highest score would get got the highest percentage of their ask, assuming the asks were reasonable and based on all the information, that was where the committee got to. Secondly, in the specific information, the situation has changed somewhat for Community of Hope where previously when the city gave and granted funding 3 years ago, they didn't have the provincial support they do now. They now have a significant amount more of provincial funding. So not only did we look at those other factors, we looked at where is the other funding for those organizations coming from, and has it changed, or what's it look like to help support the organization? And they did in the last 2 years, before they didn't, but now they have provincial funding and other funding that helps support their cause. So that would be, from a little bit of a micro look at that one, that would be why that was approached in that way. And they did, didn't score the highest. I'll leave it at that at this point, but there is in the appendix, you'll see there's a score to that.
And by comparison, to follow your logic, the Peter McKee Community Center, United Way, Harvest House, and Dans Encore did not get more provincial support?
Not as percentage of their, overall revenue and ask. They've been pretty stable. And our portion is not in some of the areas is not significant. Like on the YWCA 47, it's not a significant amount of their revenue overall. It's just a piece. A lot of them do have federal and provincial funding, but based on the needs, and give you example, the YMCA does a lot of items. Reconnect is a big component of theirs. MyRap is things that's direct city support. So that's why each one was looked at their own and scored on their own.
Yeah, I guess and come back to the basic. If we are just here for information purposes, I'm not going to make a motion, right? But if we do have the power to make motions, I would. So somebody's got to tell me what we're doing here.
Thank you, Your Worship, to Conseiller Bourgeois. So the motion to add funds can certainly be done. We would need to specify where it is, where the policy as it stands right now on the 2.2 million, I believe. 2.02 million, that would be in the responsibility of the committee, but council can add.
So it would have to, instead of from the budgeted item, it would have to be taken from the council contingency. Is that what you're saying?
Or any other area that council would like to fund it. That's the one that has the funds available, but there may be other opportunities as well.
I just feel that it's not right that we reduce by a third of the funding an organization that does good work. But I'll wait for the debate to continue and see if others share my concerns. For now, I'll just stick with the concerns that I've expressed, that maybe these are not best practices, but I'll let the other councillors say what they think about the new process and if it can be further improved for next year along those lines. And if at the end I do want to make a motion, I'll come back to it. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Councillor Richard.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the committee. Lots of hard work there. I can only imagine lots of hours. Merci, Conseiller Kingston, Steves. So the amount that was presented in our budget, did that come from once the committee had made these decisions?
No, it actually went the other way, where council provided based on inflation allocations in the budget. So the budget would have been 3% in that range last year. So basically, as part of the budget for 2025 that was deliberated in November, funds were set aside and reserved for decisions that came out of the committee, decisions based on applications that would be provided. And so based on that, and based on the scores and based on the asks, we're able to allocate funds in what the committee felt was a reasonable level to support those organizations. So it was really, here's the funds available, please review and provide your basically your awards for those community organizations.
No, that's great. And I just want to clarify that because I echo some comments from Conseiller Bourgeois, the timing of it. Having that information before we approve the budget would have been extremely nice.
If I may, the other context of that is if the committee is allocating funds, allocating awards to the community, without them having an approved amount they know that they're going for, that's a difficult proposition too, because they don't know what, what is it that the target is to fund. So that's a difficult proposition. So that's why, one, it is best practice. We provide some more detail to the council on that. And two, it's basically in order that the actual approved amount to be shared with groups in the city is allocated and approved by council before they even go down the road of basically that funding, scoring and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, so there's work that happens on both sides of that budget week. Right?
Yep.
Because in a sense, we can give them a certain number before the budget talks happen, because this is a line item that comes up.
If
It would
that's,
be workable.
right now, that's not the way the policy reads, and we can have further discussions as the year goes. Maybe some feedback from the committee on that, as well as bring back to council saying, here's some information that will provide more insight into it. If it's decided that it gets flipped a little bit, that's something we can talk as we move forward.
And I don't want to condemn the whole thing. It's just like, and there's two points that I highlighted: less pressure on counselors to support specific groups, limit the lobbying, of course. It's good to have in there, absolutely. But to know at budget time where the money is going, that's what I found that was missing this year, so.
And Councillor, it is change, it is movement, it is, and I'll due respect, I appreciate comments from everybody. It's really that change process. And then as we become a larger city, as there's so many more decisions to be made, that's something that we saw, the Londons, the Ottawas, the Reginas, that's sort of the processes. And we didn't go asking for that. That's what we were being told. Here's how it worked and here's why it worked well for them.
Yeah, I just wanted to voice my comments. Yeah, merci beaucoup.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you to Councillor Steves and Kingston, and also Greg and your committee. I sat on council since 2016, and I can remember every year getting phone calls. What do you think of this? Or do you think you could support this? And also, people would come in with the fancy window dressing presentations, and we were making decisions sometimes on how nice the presentation was instead of, what we called. So, I like this. I really do. I think that it's a learning also for us. I agree with Councillor Bourgeois. I looked over that list, and that was one of the ones that jumped out at me also, that community of hope, that thing. But overall, I think that we could all look at it and say, yeah, I wish we had a little bit more money for this one, a little bit more money for that one, or take a little bit away from there. But I would say is that the advantage is that it's an independent group that are sitting down, and, it's like you said, there's going to be some more learning curves coming, and maybe next year there'll be some more. But I think overall, I think this is a great framework going forward. I really, really do. And I do appreciate every one of you that took the time to sit down and, take time away from your families and stuff to do this. I know in the past, there was always a lot of people coming in day after day after day during budgets or before budgets to give us their presentations. And now we didn't have any this year. So, it's maybe they don't like it that way, but, as a counselor, sometimes it's hard to figure out who deserves it more than others. But I listen, kudos to you, and I do appreciate it. And, Councillor Bourgeois wanted to make a motion regards to community of hope. I would certainly support that. I just, because I've read what they do and what they're about, and I understand that they are getting more funding, you said, and but I'm not sure, 1/3 of it being taken away. But again, I mean, that's the learning curve. If there's only one out of every one that you have done, this is awesome work. I mean, I wish we were that good here, that we could get 99.9% of it right. So I'll thank you, and I'll leave it at that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Legier.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for the, for the hard work, and first of all, to all the volunteers for stepping up. And I think it's a start of a really good process. I did like the scoring. I guess I would like to know a little more about what the differentiation was. I mean, in what I saw, unfortunately, my iPad decided to reboot at the moment, but from my memory, the ranges were as low as 58 in terms of the scoring and as high as over 90, I think, for some of the others. So I think that would be important. The whole purpose, I thought, was to sort of, in some ways, streamline this and try to, remove some of the, I guess, the politics, so to speak, out of it. Although we are elected and we do represent citizens and so on, and we need to make sure that we understand in here. And I do like, what you've done. I think what I'd ask, there's a couple things. In Appendix 3, there were some recommendations, and then there were some organizations that, from memory now, were transferred over to cultural. And then when I looked at what you presented in terms of the cultural grants, those are not there. So I'm just wondering, there were some new additions, and so they were transferred over to cultural. So what exactly does that mean, Greg, if you can perhaps help me?
So as the applications were received in major multi-year, they were initially discussed, and there was talks where a lot of the organizations had always had cultural funds, and they were quite small. Meanwhile, they were, applying to the major multi-year, and with some feedback from administration, it's like these organizations and some communication with those organizations are best to fit into the cultural area. So they were basically transferred over. They didn't necessarily originally apply to culture, but as they were reviewed, said, look, this will fit better in cultural. They're not an organization that's significant in the city. They contribute as cultural organization, but wanted to basically make sure they got funding, similar to what they had in the past, a little bit more. And so that's why those ones got transferred over. Have a smaller dollar value, but certainly recognize that the importance of the work they do.
So I guess my question is, I don't see them, somehow I don't see where they have gone and whether or not we've given them any money. There were some new organizations that were asking for $10,000 or others that were asking for different, and where do I know where they went? All I have is they weren't applicable and they were transferred to culture.
In
And
the
so-
cultural spreadsheet, I think it's appendix number 5.
Yeah,
Those
and-
ones, and also on the, it's actually on the presentation we
I looked at
provided.
that
They
too.
were in the presentation. They're listed in the presentation as those ones.
I looked at that too and I didn't see them.
We can provide.
Okay, so maybe I'll get some clarity on that. I think overall, it isn't easy. I would like, though, perhaps that in the future, we have a better understanding of what the scoring looks like. So for example, if there's a low score, even though our perception is that, they are a great organization and they should be benefiting from more dollars, then help us understand that better. The second thing I would say is I don't totally disagree with maybe having to have conversations prior to budgeting, because, for example, you indicated that you went with what the trend was and and there was a certain amount of increase in you felt dollars available towards the grant process. But at the end of the day, we had a lengthy discussion during budget on making sure that we could fulfill the commitments required for our community. And again, volunteer organizations are really very strong in terms of delivering services at costs that are much less than what we could deliver. And perhaps we would have returned 5 cents and not 6 cents of the tax rate, because we would have decided that we as a council wanted to invest greater in some of these organizations, and yet we don't have sometimes that conversation. So I think in the future we have to, I would hope we could think about that, and their costs are going up as well. And so as much as I know you're trying to fit someone in, and say, well, we're going to give you some money and we're going to look at things. I mean, I'm pretty sure the organization, if they're requesting $50,000 is because they really need the 50,000. And we're coming back saying, well, you've got to leverage this, and I kind of understand. So I'd like to be in a better position where we rarely give people the full amount. Greg, and I think that's kind of where I sort of feel like we're trying to be the best we can for everyone, but sometimes, you know, maybe we have to have a broader discussion about increasing the funding if we need it. And lastly, perhaps then your group would need a contingency. Your group would need something that you can allow, or to come to council with, look, you know what, we did this, but we're short X number of thousands of dollars because of this. And then at that point, we maintain the objectivity of your committee. And on the other hand, it's more helpful in terms of decision making. So
Appreciate it. Well, thank you. And yeah, we'll take all those things in consideration as we go.
leave it at that. Thank you. Merci.
Councillor Edgett.
Thank you, Worship. I think this process is excellent. We've been working towards this for several years now, and the process is really providing the fairness and transparency that I think many of us have been looking for over the last few years, and certainly having the public input is really important from how I view this, for sure. I just have a question here about process still. I'm wondering if there was a motion to come from council. If I understand the process, it would be a recommendation to increase the total amount of the grants, if I understand that correctly, and then that new total will go back to the committee, and then they would start their work all over again?
Maybe basically, ideally, the understanding would ideally be that if there was a specific organization that council felt should receive more, I don't think the process would be to increase the funds by $150,000, and then the committee goes back to allocating across the $150,000 extra. I think the expectation would be if there's something in this list that council feels that would like to support more a specific organization, that was more the thinking. If that's, I think that's where a couple of councilors also come from, not to increase the overall pot and then having to circumvent, go back, because a lot of these organizations would like to know how are they getting funds in January very soon, which the letters will go out this week. So it's really specific organization by organization, not full envelope.
But how does that differ from what we did in the past?
I think in the past, we did look at specific organizations, they would come, and then council would look at specific organizations to provide more money to. At the budget time, there would be, we increased the grant funding by X dollars at that point, but then basically it was allocated across organizations. It was usually specific groups that says, you know what, give an example, Harvest House in 2024 budget. They came in, they were giving another $57,000 on the specific, not across, add to the whole pot and then give everyone $5,000 more. That wasn't the expectation. I mean, council could do that if you so wish, counselor, but that wasn't the expectation. It was more felt the allocation to each organization has been fair. There's a specific one that council feels is, could be higher based on their feeling and, not having an opportunity to look at the applications. That's council's right to do so.
Well, I don't see much difference between that and what has been done in the past, where we pick out certain individual organizations, and certain councillors want more money to go to those ones without any other recommendation in the overall amount of the grants that we're giving, or in the whole point of the process, as I understand it, was to evaluate each organization and make a recommendation based on how they fit into our long-term strategy with the city and their actual actions within our community. So I think if we go down that road, then we're going to be heading back to what we were doing in the past, is my view on that at this moment, Your Worship.
All right. Any other questions? Councillor Bourgeois.
I will make a motion that we add, and if it's from the council contingency, that's probably the solution, contrary to what Councillor Edgett just summarized, but correct me if I'm wrong. So we'll take 5,000 more to, and I'm thinking of 3 organizations that asked for more, but got even less than what we gave them last year. So these are the 3 organizations that I think we should be supporting more. John Howard, I would add 5,000, so they'd go down still from 17,200 to 15,000, but at least it's more digestible in my opinion. Second is the House of Nazareth, that instead of going down from 37.5 to 30, they would go down from 37.5 to 32.5. So another 5,000 to House of Nazareth. And Community of Hope, I would add 10,000. So instead of going down from 37.5 to 25, they would go down from 37.5 to 35. So they'd still lose some, but at least that would be digestible. So 5,000 more to John Howard, 5,000 more to House of Nazareth, and 10,000 more to Community of Hope. Just to test the theory that we do have authority as council and can make modifications to this, but not from the budget item of 2.2, from the contingency. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion? I do not see a seconder for this motion. Councillor Edgett, no? All right. I would like to say a huge thank you to the committee. And I think at this time, respect for the process. As has been mentioned, we do have a council contingency. If something were to come up, if someone is in dire need to survive in our community, I think there is a process for them to be able to apply. I'd like to thank the committee wholeheartedly for the work that you've done on this. We are trying to move as a community to a values-driven and data-informed community. And this really goes a long way toward that. So thank you for all of the hard work that you've put into this. Thanks.
Next is item 10.4, and it's Transaqua Compost Facility Site Alternatives Report from CBCL. And I believe that our CAO is going to introduce this.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So at this point, the agenda item would be a review of the CBCL Transaqua Compost Facility Site Alternatives Report. In response to council motion of, I believe it was in January 2024, that the city council insists that Transaqua build a facility on its lot to keep the odors inside and to equip it with air filters to eliminate the odors, or alternatively move its aeration plant outside the city. This administration and Transaqua joined to get CBCL to provide some of these alternatives. And at this point in time, we'll ask CBCL to present their findings.
Thank you. Councillor Butler wishes to speak before the consultant. So quickly.
I don't agree with the council report form, because we have a recommendation there that's contrary to the recommendation that we already have. We have a motion. This one says recommend that city council request Transaqua to present additional information on the effort to minimize the impact of fugitive odors from its composting process, the results of their financial analysis of all 3 options, and outline, we've already had this if this is for information only, we have a motion that states that it's either you can fix it or move it. So I don't see the recommendation's been a motion already by council unanimously.
Sorry, just one second here. Go ahead.
I guess I guess we could confer with legal on process here and to make sure that we're not providing a recommendation or that's different than the motion, but
If it's for information purposes only and there's no vote to be absolutely, yes, that could be changed.
Okay. So where are we? We have a consultant standing here waiting to present to us. I think we should hear from our consultant, should we not? Yes? Yes. Please, the floor is yours. You just need to touch your microphone there. Excellent, you're on.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor. Thanks for having me in here again. My name is Brendan Thorne with CBCL. I've been in a few times talking about the sewer system planning we have underway. I was on the Vision Lands team, and some of my colleagues are working on the water treatment plant, and have been working on the Kodiak Regional Policing Facility. But here today to talk about the Transaqua compost facility, site alternatives, and the cost analysis we've done.
Oh, I'm sorry, but your microphone has gone off. Thank you.
Okay, or controlling the odors at the site that we have now. So just before I get started, I just want to thank my colleague Manuela Chavarro, who helped me out with this project. She did a lot of the research, developed the concepts, and compiled a lot of the costing data that I'll be sharing. So let's get into it. So this is the existing facility. I guess we probably don't need to get into a lot of background. Most folks, I think, are familiar with the odor issue. We were asked to look at estimates for enclosing the existing facilities and controlling the odors at the site, or looking at relocating to one of two sites, known site currently owned by Transaqua, or a third site that would have to be acquired somewhere, perhaps closer to the city than the subject site. So here's the existing facility. Most of the odors are generated on the composting pads that we see there, and then the receiving and blending area. That's where most of the odors come from. The curing pads are generally pads that are piles that are 2 to 3 months away from being finished compost, and they would smell the same as the finished product that we generate there, or really any commercial compost product that you might see in the market. So what we would look to do here is build a building over that area that is generating most of the odors, So that would go over the composting piles and the blending area. And that would total about 200,000 square feet, 20,000 square meters. So that's about the footprint of about 2 of the Avenir centers, if you're looking to grasp that scale. So by enclosing that area, we can control the exhaust air from that operational pile, and we would exhaust that air through the biofilter that you see labeled there. We have a similar process at the Transaqua plant, though at a much smaller scale. So that biofilter scrubs the odor producing molecules, and then we would exhaust that air through in this case, 100-foot stack to get the exhaust air up and be less of I guess to control that plume, hopefully away from the neighborhoods, or to get it up away from those neighborhoods. So looking at the capital costs we have there to build that building, that's $75 million that we'd be looking at for the building itself and the biofilter, and a portion of that cost also goes into the air collection and handling system inside the building. Operational costs total about $500,000, so that's associated with the increased power consumption at the site to handle and move all that air. There's really no increase in cost to the hauling. The site's staying in the same location, same distance from the plant, so we don't really have an increase in hauling cost. No impact to the public pickup program. Everything would stay on site at this location. And there's really a low risk of public opposition to this option, as we wouldn't need to go through any new permitting process. It would really just be looking at improving things at the site. So there would be an approval to construct, but likely no EIA or anything like that that would require a public consultation like some of the other sites. And just for reference, we were asked to look at the greenhouse gas emissions for this site. It is actually quite high by comparison to the other options, mostly due to that increase in power consumption at this site. So that's enclosing the existing site. Oh, sorry, we got the other costs there in French, if anybody wants to digest that. So then looking at another option to relocate off-site, Transaqua owns a facility, a site out in rural New Brunswick in Five Rivers. So this was a site that was originally processed seafood waste and composted on the site, though it did have an approval for processing a biosolids. So it was a good fit for Transaqua as they were able to begin operations immediately at this site, though it was planned for additional storage beyond what we have storage for at the compost site here in the city, and some distribution from that site to people looking to use the compost in farming operations up in that area. So when we look at improving this site, we'd really be relocating the existing compost facility to this site. We wouldn't want to really consume any of the space that we have there because we need that capacity for the curing and the storage that we do now. So we'd look to expand the curing site to replicate what we have in Moncton and build out the active compost pads for the aeration and the GORE system that we're using here in the city now. So that would expand the site quite significantly, and we'd also have to add a treatment pond there to handle the runoff from the site. And currently, the treatment pond at the Moncton site drains to the city sewer and gets processed back through Transaqua. Here, we'd probably have to have a more sophisticated system to actually treat the leachate on site before discharging it to the environment. So a fairly significant undertaking. And the capital cost there is $46 million to develop that site. No real increase in operational and maintenance cost because it's going to be basically the same process as we have here in the city now. The increasing hauling cost, though, is quite significant. So because this site is about 90 kilometers away from the city, hauling biosolids up there, round trips every day. I think we have about 12 trips a week that we'd have to make. So that's a significant cost to the process. So that adds $833,000. Because of the distance from the city, we'd either eliminate the public pickup program and have to find another way to dispose of a significant amount of the compost that we generate, or we could keep the pickup program here in the city somewhere, but we'd have to haul all that compost back to the city. And it'd be nice if we could use the same trucks that were hauling the biosolids to the site to haul finished compost back, but unfortunately there's a risk of cross-contamination there, so we'd have to be doubling up on those trips. So it does add almost $1 million in cost. So there is a bit of a risk of public opposition at this site, again, mostly due to the permitting process. We would have to do an EIA and get an approval to construct to expand this facility. So there is a risk there through that permitting process. Though it is fairly rural, there are still some folks in that area that there may be some resistance to further development at this site. The annual increase in greenhouse gases that we see there is really related to the trucking, quite small compared to the other option. The third option we looked at would be to eliminate some of those trucking costs. So we were looking at doing another compost site on a green field somewhere closer to the city, perhaps within the city, but far away from residences. So the requirement from Department of Environment is for a 300-meter setback from any residence. Right now we're at 800 or 900 meters from residences, and we know the problem we have, so we looked for sites that would be about at least 2 kilometers from any residences. And we did find a couple options around the city, outside the city, kind of in all directions, looked at sites that may be feasible. And there are a few sites, but as you can imagine, any site is going to have some public resistance. So this would again be pretty well taking the existing site we have here at DeLong Drive and dropping that into a new site somewhere else. So capital costs similar to Five Rivers is about 46 million. Operating costs stay about the same because we're not really changing the process. Depending on where that site lands, we could have an increase in hauling costs. So we looked at anywhere from 15 kilometers is about the distance to the site from the plant right now. So we looked at up to 30 kilometers from the site. So could see an increase there. Minor impact on the public pickup program. I don't think 30 kilometers would really scare anybody off. So there'd probably still be a lot of people in the city that would use that site for public pickup. However, there is a high risk of public opposition. Anywhere in the city or even in the surrounding communities, there's going to be a lot of resistance to developing a site, mostly due to the recent negative publicity around the composting facility. I think for a lot of years it worked well in its location, but the city has pushed closer to that site, and you know that could happen again and have another council dealing with this issue as the city perhaps pushes closer to wherever we put this. So it's going to be hard to be right about a new location anywhere close to the city. Annual greenhouse gas emissions could be quite minor. Again, really depends on how far we're hauling the material to get to site. And sorry, that looks like that. So that would be the site somewhere close to the city. So for the two options where we're replacing either this combo site at DeLong Drive in Five Rivers or anywhere else near the city, we'd have to decommission the existing compost site and return it to something close to its original state. So that would be eliminating a lot of the pads, closing up the retention pond, and removing most of the earthwork that's been done there. So to do that, we'd have a capital cost of about $8 million that it would cost to kind of shut everything down out there. And then we'd have about $3 million in assets we can salvage from that site, but there'd be a loss of about $10 million in assets there that aren't at the limit of their design life that we would lose by relocating off-site. So a quick summary here of what the life cycle cost looks like, kind of pushed out over the 25 years to be able to really compare the options. So those on the first option there, we have that $75 million in capital. 25 years of the increased O&M costs amounts to about 88 million. Expanding at the Five Rivers site, capital cost plus the trucking costs and the loss of the existing site totals 85. The new compost site, anywhere close to the city, similar capital cost, 46 million, 4 million in annual haulage increase. Site remediation, but with that one, we could have delays due to the public opposition and permitting process that really could push that cost out and cause some cost escalation there. So it does start to, if you push it out, say 5 years, we're getting close to that same $80 million price tag we're seeing on the other options. So it's a pretty significant amount there to invest to deal with that issue. I mean, a couple things on the good news end would be the work that's been done at the plant over the last year or so to combat the odor issue. We've been adding lime. We got all the covers in place. We've built some additional walls and done some strapping to make sure the covers stay in place and stay tight to the piles. A lot of that work, I think, has reduced the number of complaints we've seen lately. And even I think through the summer, we were hauling some material to the Five Rivers site, so there was less processing at the Moncton plant. And those operational tweaks have been minor, relatively low cost. So I think we should let those have their day and see where we end up with this problem. So happy to take any questions. Kevin from the plant is here and can help me out if there's any operational questions, but happy to hear from council.
Terrific. Thank you. And thank you to Manuela too for this detail. Councillor Butler, is there a motion you would like to make?
It's a couple of questions I'd like to ask him first.
I'd like to get a motion on the table of some sort.
Before I can know what motion to make.
Okay. Well, I'll let you go ahead then. I usually like to get a motion, but you go ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you. This has been on the table for a while. And your job was to be the independent consultant?
Yep.
Because you kept saying we did this, we did that. I was kind of wondering if you worked for Transact or you're independent consultant, you said, we hauled, we done this, we done that.
Royal we.
I don't quite understand, Royal.
I guess that's just how I talk.
I'm sorry?
That's just how I framed it. I mean, Transaqua did that.
Yeah. So,
I don't work for Transaqua.
okay, okay. So it wasn't we, it was they.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So one of the things that I seen in your presentation with number one and a couple of the other ones too is that one of the pillars in our plan for the city is to cut greenhouse gases. So, you know, when you go to number one, you know, that's there's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions coming out of that. So, you know, for $75 million, we're actually putting more greenhouse gases into the air. But I would say this is that, you know, over the summer, and being the counselor, myself and Counselor Steves, is that we didn't get a lot of calls over the summer. But about I'd say around the end of November, the 1st of December, we started getting calls again about the smell. And it's kind of like when we started to bring, I shouldn't say we, when Transaqua brought it back, started bringing the stuff back, that we started getting the calls again. And even till this morning, we were starting to get calls. So, you know, there's a lot of greenhouse gases also back there. So what I guess my issue with this is that when we looked at the council report form, they were saying for us to give Transaqua more time, and I think you're saying it too, is let's see what they can do here to, you know, we've been at this for about 7 years now. You know, I was at a meeting this summer or late fall maybe, when Kevin was there and an hour to Bruce Tate and Mr. Arsenault, Eric, were there. And Kevin talked about, maybe Kevin could come to the mic, but Kevin talked about that the plant where it is now, because of our population growth, could double or even triple in the years to come. And so I would think that it's wise now for us to start thinking about, you know, where we're going to put this. And we have a motion, unanimous motion by council to move it inside or move it out the city. The complaints are just, you know, maybe when it was first put there and the growth didn't happen, we had no problem. But 300 meters now is that'd be kind of like it's I forget how far it is now, but
About 800.
about 800. So, you know, 800 and they're still getting the smell continually. But there's lots of people in the north end that, you know, that are having problems with this. It's not just the way the wind blows as it goes. How many acres is back on DeLong? Do you have that?
I'm not sure exactly the acreage of it, Kevin. No.
Nobody knows how many acres are back there? How much property is on?
I don't have it, no.
Would Kevin know how many acres?
I have that information, but
We have to go up to the mic. You have to go up to the mic. Yes or no?
that information I don't have right off the top of my head, but we do have a report where we could forward that information to you.
Yeah, because, you know, when we talk about this independent consulting work here, one of the questions that I was looking at and I couldn't find in there's how many acres, because when you think about, you know, the Moncton Industrial Park, the Greater Moncton Industrial Park, they're always buying property. So when you think about what the price on that property would be back there, you know, get an independent realtor to go back and look and see what the cost is, you know, it would drastically probably cut down the cost of this, right? So I think in that, you know, the mayor's asking me to make a motion, but there's really no motion. You know, we asked for information, how much it's going to cost. Our motion was to move it inside, which is too high, or to move it outside. So, you know, we have to move it outside. So that's what the motion said. Your information would tell us that the keeping it where it is and putting it inside is too expensive, $75 million. So, you know, as far as a motion, Madam Mayor, I think that the motion's already been made.
Oh, what you could do if you'd like, is make a motion that this is just for information
We just did.
purposes
Oh,
only.
you want me to do that?
Yeah, if you'd like.
Yeah, oh, I can make that motion that this is just for information only, that we accepted the information that you've given us, and that we still agree with the original motion of moving it inside or out.
Sure. That this is for information purposes only and does not change your previous motion.
Absolutely.
Good. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Steves. All right.
Thank you.
You're good?
Yep.
Councillor Legier.
Thank you. Thanks for the information and the presentation, and certainly I think it allows some reflection on how a city grows and how all of a sudden we're faced with these problems when the original concept might have been that this particular facility was going to be quite a ways away from any residents and so on. And certainly, I think from a city's perspective, it's important that that we recognize that it's not the only odor that we have in the city, although it seems to be quite prevalent in one area, and so I think this is important. I think the other piece, though, that I'm often reminded is that, well, first of all, I thank you for doing the study. I think this is more to Transaqua, and I think sometimes it takes a catalyst to sort of move things forward. You are, however, though, and we're reminded in our council report form that you're an incorporated under statute the province of New Brunswick, and you're governed by your own board of directors, and then as such, the city has no authority to direct Transaqua to undertake any options listed in the report. I think, again, you're hearing the frustrations. I think if and I would certainly be opposed to hauling any more biosolids outside the city. I think cities in North America and elsewhere have recognized that the waste that is created by a city needs to be dealt with by the city. And, thanks to Five Rivers, there is a place, but I don't think that is what we should be doing in the future. Just my opinion, but I think there's more and more to be said. However, again, this is a product, so to speak, of an enhanced sewage treatment process that brought us to having unforeseen consequences, including the increased amount of biosolids that you're currently hauling away. So I would hope, and I do applaud you for the changes, Transaqua, to the changes that have been done. I think that in bringing you in as consultants and taking a look at what the best practices are, I think is important. I would hope that the next step is going to be to say, okay, well, it's $75 million. It's a lot of money, but on the other hand, this is our plan for the next 30 years, and this is how we're going to address it. And I would get more benefit from that because it is here to stay. We have a very effective treatment process now, sewage treatment process now, and I think that is really where we need to focus. It's clear that prevailing winds play a big part in this. A lot more towards the north end. However, I live in the opposite direction, and some days it is clear that there is an odor, very specific and very resembling your facility. So I would just sort of say that this, I hope, is the start. We can't force you to do something, but I think that in the recognizing that it's the right thing to do, I think will be really important. And I think that's really what council, as much as we'd like to do it, I think we have to try to impress on you the urgency of this. And I would also say to thank you for the things that you've already put in place. And there were less phone calls, as Councillor Butler alluded to. So therefore, there are some progress. There has been progress. And if it means moving forward with a building and a filter and a stack over 100 feet, I think those are the things that need to be discussed. And the three communities share that. And to your point, finding another location, and if it happened to be in another community, you may raise the same issues and really haven't solved anything. So I hope that, you know, we come up with something that is a long-term solution. And again, I did go to your annual general meeting. There were a lot of improvements, that were cited. And I think that that's really something that has shown that you did respond. Sometimes I would prefer to be proactive than reactive, but you've obviously reacted to the, council's concerns. And again, I would hope that you would come back at some point and say, here's the solution. That we're going to analyze all of that, and we're going to take the comments into consideration, and we're going to come back with, this is the plan. This is the plan for the 3 municipalities. This is the impact on the 3 municipalities. And the 3 municipalities need to understand that as well and kind of go from there. So again, thank you.
Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Thank you very much for your.
Thank you, Your Worship.
The first one is, why are we shipping it altogether? Is there not enough acreage on the Transaqua site presently to be able to treat this material appropriately?
No, there's not enough room on that site.
Pardon?
No, there's not enough room on that site to take the existing compost facility that we have now and try to drop that down on the compost facility or the wastewater treatment plant facility in Riverview.
Not
There's
even in
enough space
part,
there.
that the first phase could be filtered, aerated, whatever, before we ship it to?
No, the first step is really mixing the biosolids with the bark and everything that goes into the compost. So that needs to happen where we're going to be doing the compost.
And there's not enough room, not enough space on the present site to do that.
Well, then you're hauling twice or 4 times as much. Like by the time you bulk it up, then you're hauling 4 times as much material from Riverview over to the Moncton. So instead of 1 trip, you're making 4.
Okay, it would cost more, but it would smell less.
Fair.
So that's not an option being considered because, I mean, it'd be nice to have those costs so we can compare, wouldn't it?
Yes.
In 2023, Councillor, the Department of Environment gave us a directive to transport any excess biosolids that the site could not process off-site. Since we didn't have another site, we went to Environment in Miramichi, and the site conditions were unsuitable and damaging our equipment. Department of Environment located a site for us temporarily just outside of Amherst, where we transported the excess biosolids to Amherst. And then that was a one-time deal. That site was then off limits to us. And at that time, just through some coincidental timing and fortune, the Five Rivers facility became available, and we purchased that facility. And we've been transporting excess biosolids there last year. This is the first full year that we actually operated the Five Rivers site full-time from June 6th to the end of October. And to answer the question back to Councillor Butler, the site is 350 acres. The current assessed value as is, the site is 7.1 million.
I'm not sure if I got the answer to my question, but.
And a little bit more on that question. I mean, we do need to keep some land at the Transaqua site for future expansion of that wastewater treatment facility. So if we start doing our mixing and using some of the area that we have available there, we'll quickly run out of space for future expansion of settling tanks and operational stuff at the plant.
Okay. Second question, I have no expertise in this, but is there any other biological or chemical treatment that we can apply? This is an engineering one, but I remember, way back, I think I ran for council 2004 or maybe 2001. And there was a biologist who said we could clean up a lot of the water by doing this instead of what the engineers were proposing at 100 times the costs and everything else. So I don't know what your training is, and I'm not questioning it whatsoever. But from an engineering perspective, this is the solution. And with all due respect to engineers that we have on staff, I don't doubt that. But is there a biodegradable kind of solution that we could apply anywhere else in the world that they're doing this differently from what we're doing?
So there's a couple options there that I guess were beyond the scope of this report we just did. There are digesters, but you still end up with a solid at the end that you need to deal with, be it in a composting capacity or in some other type of disposal capacity. And then there's also an in-vessel kind of smaller footprint compost process. But I would say for both of those, you're probably staring down the same capital investment.
Okay, but you're aware of alternatives
Yep,
and
yep.
you discarded them in favor
Well,
of these three.
We limited it to the option to enclose the existing site or to relocate it off-site. That was kind of the options that we were asked to look at. So
Yeah.
we did narrow it to that.
So are you aware of, because I'm looking at the recommendation and I know we're not considering it, but we request Transaqua to sort of, do some other legwork to do it. But do you know if there are other cities in the world that are dealing with this same problem, but instead of these millions of dollars of buildings and treatments, there would be something else that we could do, something outside the box?
I don't think there's an easy answer here. I think it's the costs would be similar to these options we've shared. I mean, you can look at them, but I think it'd be the similar outcome in terms of cost, in terms of byproducts, in terms of not affecting a community somewhere that is adjacent to this process.
All right, I'm really surprised that there's no other communities in this situation and that there's no alternatives, but I'll take your word for it. I don't know any better. My last question is on the report itself, where you say, one of the criteria that you're, in addition to money, in addition to transport and CO2 emissions and everything else, one of the criteria is public opposition. And I just wanted to know how you came to assess potential public opposition. Is it solely based on cost, that people would prefer option A because it's less expensive than B, which is less expensive than C? Or do you have any other measures of public opposition that you would like to share with us?
I guess most of it came from the fact that to build a new facility, we would need to get an environmental permit to approve the construction of that facility. And through that process, an EIA would likely be required, and that EIA would require public consultation. So because of that process, there's more opportunity within that process for the public to come out and make their voice heard. Not that that's a bad thing, but there's just more opportunity to make sure that that consultation takes place. And simply, when you put a facility close to a city like Moncton, where there's a huge population base compared to a rural facility, you're probably going to get more opposition just simply by the number of people that are in that area.
Right, so your concern is not that there would be public opposition, because there's going to be public opposition no matter. NIMBYism, and I understand that completely, but your concern is that by doing B or C instead of A, we open it up to public consultations.
Correct. That's what drives.
I disagree with that way of thinking, but at least thank you for the information.
Yeah.
I appreciate it sincerely. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I've got two questions. For the indoor option that you looked at, is there anything similar in size in Canada? And did you compare it to, you said 2 Avenir Centre, so just to give us a little bit of a scope, but is there any other organization that has done such a thing?
Nothing that we came across. A couple, just for comparison, we looked at a facility that was recently built that it's a smaller footprint because they do in-vessel composting, but it was a similar cost to do that process. So you could change the process and shrink that footprint, but because you would again be getting rid of the open air, the GORE system, which, is there anywhere else that does the GORE system? Yeah, there's other spots, but they don't have them covered with buildings, right? Yeah. So, sorry, but so nobody that has a similar system to what we have here that actually has put that inside of a building. There are other smaller footprint compost processes that could go in a smaller building.
Okay, so what we were asking for then is something that doesn't exist anywhere else. That's been your finding? This would be a brand new concept in Moncton?
Yep.
Okay, interesting. My second question is, you were talking about the distance is about 800 meters from the facility to the public. But what's the official distance in other provinces for a facility like yourself? Like, is there variance in the provinces of the distance?
Yeah, yeah. We didn't look at that because we were working in New Brunswick.
Right.
I think I have seen the requirements in Nova Scotia, but I can't remember what they are.
And and what is the requirements for New Brunswick then?
300 meters.
300 meters, okay. All right, I think that's good for now, Meryl. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I see no other questions. We do have a motion on the floor that has been moved and seconded that this information is for information purposes only. Are we ready to go to the? Oh, yes. Okay. So perhaps the clerk could read the motion out. Or put it on the screen or whatever. Oh. I think that is self-evident, but. Okay. Are we supposed to be looking at a different page or something? Oh, it is there. Oh, okay, sorry.
It should be on both screens.
January 15th, 2024, the original motion.
January 15th, 20, no, it's January. Was it? Okay. So
The following motion was put forward by Council.
January 15th, 2024 was the motion. Do you remember? Yes? Yes.
That's what it
Okay.
says here.
Okay. All right, with that change. Okay. All right. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. I would go, do we go to the voting page? Mover was Councillor Butler, seconder by Councillor Steves. Could you please indicate? Thank you. And I believe we can move to the vote now. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much, Brennan, Daniela, or Manuela. Thank you.
The next motion before council is the scoreboard at Rocky Stone Field. And the motion before council is that Moncton City Council approve the replacement of the score clock at Rocky Stone Field at a cost of $90,000 and that the funds be paid from W24N 10HN CN Sports Split Field Lighting, which has available funds. And we'll need a mover and a second.
Terrific. Councillor Legier, I have you up first. Do you wish to move this recommendation?
I do, and I have a question.
Excellent. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Kingston, I'd ask that you indicate on the screen. Mover and seconder, thank you. Awesome. Back to you, Councillor Leger, for your question.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe a question to Dan, Dan Hicks. In terms of the replacement, what would be the expected, I guess, life cycle of a scoreboard like this, and maybe just tell us a little bit about the improvements of what people can expect.
Certainly, Your Worship, through to Councillor Leger, scoreboard life cycles are somewhere in the vicinity of about 20 years, which would be about the life cycle of that this one has been. Our intention is to replace like with like. The only enhancement that we'll have is the text on it will be bilingual. The current score clock is English only. But yeah, the electronics have basically run their course. We can no longer find replacement parts, and that drives the need to replace.
Oh, sorry, your microphone has gone off. Do you mind turning it on again? Sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's
So
timed out.
you're,
No, I'm
so
just
you're
kidding.
able to use the existing frame and the rest of it and just changing the inside? Is that what you're doing, or are you changing the whole board altogether and it'll be a completely new look?
Okay, so thank you for the question. We intend to use the existing footings and the steel frame that holds the score clock.
Okay.
And the score clock actually comes in about 6 different panels. So the old one will come off in pieces, the new panels will go up, they'll get wired together, and bada bing, bada boom.
And in your report, it says 6 to 8 weeks delivery, so it'll be, I guess your plan is to have it ready for the spring of 2025.
That's correct. Yeah, we've got some pricing now, so when we're able to move, we'll place the order, and ideally, we'd have it installed prior to the play this year.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Dan, I guess I ask you, but why now? Why not a month ago? Did something happen since budget deliberations that we couldn't consider it then?
Yes, good question. Actually, it did come up a little more unexpectedly. We'd patched and worked through. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to get in time to meet the budget process. So that's why we're here with you today. So unfortunately, we just couldn't meet those
Okay.
deadlines.
You sort of indicated you're not too sure if it's going to last for the 2025, but what's the risk? Is it 20% chance that it's going to break down, 80% chance that it's going to break down, or?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, it's one of those how long is a piece of string questions. I don't have a definitive answer, but we have been robbing parts off of old score clocks to get it back in service. And our electricians that do the work are indicating to us that they would sleep better at nights if we had it replaced. So that's as good a answer as I can give you.
Yeah, I guess we won't know until we will know. My last question is, are we going to tender this, or are we going to go out for competing bids, or?
Yeah.
How did you come up with the 90,000? That's a business estimate?
Yeah, we will follow the Public Procurement Act. We do have some options available to us. We've been discussing with our purchasing manager. One option is to use the canoe purchasing process where we can seek prices from pre-approved vendors. So that's helped us derive what a budget number should be for the supply and install.
Okay, so really now it's sort of a preliminary decision. If a bid comes in and the best bid is 250,000, we'd have to revisit.
It's highly unlikely. We've already searched the market and are fairly confident in our estimates.
Okay. All right. Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you, Councillor Richard.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Dan, can't leave now.
Sorry.
From the financials, we're talking about the 400,000 that was allocated for the CN Sports Field lighting. Where are we? Can you give us an update on that, on the lighting there?
Yes, absolutely. So the motion that came at last year's council budget deliberations was to get lights on a second set of fields at CN Sportsplex. At the time, we didn't have any engineering estimates that were very strong, so we threw a high number at it just to make sure we were covered and wouldn't have to come back to council to ask for subsequent funding again. Now, our engineering firm that we hired was able to find a solution that cost less than what that number was that we presented at council last year. So we were able to achieve the objective of getting that second set of fields lit with $100,000 and not the $500,000 that we came up with on the fly last year at budget deliberation. So currently there are 2 fields at CN Sportsplex that are lit, both fields 8 and field 9. So the objectives were met with that level of funding.
There were extra poles installed. Is that all? Are those poles still there? Has that all been moved over, switched around?
Yeah, the poles that were there were able to be reused. We were able to secure new lamps and we were able to rewire a cabinet versus bringing in all new 3-phase power. The lighting systems now are more efficient. So the power that we had on site was sufficient to add another field. Unfortunately, if we want to add more fields later on, we don't have room in the cabinets or in the buildings for the circuitry. But for the 2 fields we have there, it is working and operational.
That being said, there could be an option to light up another field?
If we did want to add another field in, we would at that point have to bring more power in on site. And likely in order to do that, we would have to build a small building to house all the electrical components for any future expansion of lighting on that site.
Okay, because I mean, the money was allocated to that field for lights. If there's any way to make that work to add more lights, I'm sure we can get some more kids out there.
Sure. If it's council's pleasure, we could come back with a recommendation for other options to expand that.
That would be appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terrific. I don't see any other questions at this time. I think we can move to the vote. Please indicate on your screen. Oh, Councillor Steves is not here, but we still continue. Thanks. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
I got to go back there too. Next is reading of bylaws, lecture des arrêtés municipaux, and all of them are second and third readings. So bear with me. Okay. I'm going to need council's permission to give reading to the zoning bylaws at 222.41 housekeeping T-Berry Avenue.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Butler, seconded by Councillor Richard. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We don't have to go to the screen on this, do we? No. No. The answer is no.
No. Okay. Well, we'll cancel that with one person who voted. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So Butler and it was Butler
and Richard.
Richard. Thank you. Okay. So a bylaw and amendment of the City of Moncton zoning bylaw being bylaw Z 222.41 rezoning housekeeping T-Berry Avenue. It's a second reading. Arrêté portant modification de l'arrêté de zonage de la ville de Moncton sur l'arrêté Z 222.41 rezonage administratif.
A bylaw and amendment of the City of Moncton zoning bylaw held by being.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
A bylaw and amendment of the City of Moncton zoning bylaw being bylaw Z 222.41 rezoning housekeeping T-Berry Avenue. This is a third reading. Arrêté portant modification de l'arrêté de zonage de la ville de Moncton.
A bylaw and amendment of the City of Moncton zoning bylaw being bylaw Z.222.41 rezoning housekeeping T-Berry Avenue. This is a third reading.
1519.4. I need permission for second reading.
Thank you. Moved by someone. Councillor Legier, seconded by Councillor Butler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
A bylaw and amendment of the City of Moncton Development Charge bylaw being bylaw Z 1519.4 development charges. It's a second reading. Arrêté portant modification de l'arrêté concernant
A bylaw amendment of the City of Moncton Development Charge bylaw being bylaw Z-15.1519.4 Development Charge. This is the third reading.
Butler, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries
A
unanimously.
bylaw and amendment of the City of Moncton's Development Charge bylaw being bylaw Z-1519.4 Development Charge, third reading. Arrêté portant modification de l'arrêté concernant les redevances
A bylaw an amendment of the City of Moncton Development Charge bylaw being bylaw Z-1519.4 Development Charge. This is a third reading.
rates and charges for services provided by the City of Moncton, 13.24.2. I need permission for second reading.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Legier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
A bylaw and amendment of a bylaw, fees, rates, and charges for the services provided by the City of Moncton, bylaw A 1324.2. It's a second reading. Arrêté portant modification de l'arrêté concernant
A bylaw and amendment of the bylaw fees, rates, and charges for services provided in the City of Moncton bylaw A-1324.4. This is a second reading.
Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Legier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
a bylaw and amendment of a bylaw for fees, rates, and charges for the services provided by the City of Moncton, being bylaw A 1324.2. It's the third reading. Arrêté portant
A bylaw and amendment of bylaw fees, rates, and charges for services provided by the City of Moncton, bylaw A-1324.4.2. This is the third reading.
second reading for bylaw relating to the approval of budgets for downtown Moncton Centre-Ville and establishing a special business improvement levy.
Thank you. Who would like to move this? Moved by Councillor Legier, seconded by Councillor Richard. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
A bylaw and amendment of a bylaw relating to the approval of the budget for downtown Moncton Centre-Ville, Inc., and to establish a special business improvement area levy in the City of Moncton, being bylaw A 1002.24. It's the second reading. Arrêté portant modification
A bylaw and amendment of a bylaw relating to the approval of the budget for the downtown Moncton Centre-Ville, Inc., and to establish a special business improvement area levy in the City of Moncton, being bylaw A-1002.24. This is the second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Richard. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
a bylaw and amendment of a bylaw relating to the approval of the budget for the downtown Moncton Centre-Ville, Inc., and to establish a special business improvement area levy in the City of Moncton, being bylaw A 1002.24. It's the third reading. Arrêté portant
A bylaw and amendment of a bylaw relating to the approval of the budget for downtown Moncton Centre-Ville, Inc., and to establish a special business improvement area levy in the City of Moncton, being bylaw A-1002.24. This is the third reading.
motions and resolutions, les motions, avis de motion et résolution. And I do have to go back here because we do have to vote on these ones. No. Okay. First is deposits to the General Operating Reserve Fund, or reserve, sorry. Whereas Section 101 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on the City Council to create a General Operating Reserve Fund, and whereas the said act requires that deposits be made to the General Operating Reserve Fund be authorized by resolution, whereas the City Treasurer recommends a deposit to the General Operating Reserve Fund in the amount of $1,100,000 be made to the General Operating Fund for the 2024 operating surplus. And whereas the City Treasurer recommends a deposit to the General Operating Reserve Fund in the amount of $906,472 be made from the General Operating General Operating Fund for approval level 3 items from 2025 budget to purchase using the 2024 surplus. And whereas the city treasurer recommends a deposit to the general operating reserve fund in the amount of $732,000 be made from the general operating fund to fund initiatives in 2025. And therefore be it resolved that authorization be granted for a deposit in the amount of $2,738,472 be made to the general operating reserve fund from the general operating fund.
Terrific. Is there someone who would like to move that? Councillor Legier, and seconded by Councillor Kingston, and I would ask that you note to that on the screen. Thank you. Are we ready for the vote? On the vote, all those in favor indicate on your screen or opposed.
Steve's is not back.
Okay,
Motion carried.
motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Next is deposits to general capital reserve, whereas section 101 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on city council to create a general capital reserve fund. And whereas the said act requires that deposits made into the general capital reserve fund be authorized by resolution. And whereas the city treasurer recommends the deposit of $400.36 be made to the General Capital Reserve Fund consisting of net proceeds from the sale of fleet equipment. And whereas the city treasurer recommends the deposit of $29,565.22 be made to the General Capital Reserve Fund consisting of annual development charges for 2024, and therefore be it resolved that authorization be granted for a deposit in the amount of $43,965.58 be made into the General Capital Reserve Fund.
Thank you. Is there someone who wishes to move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Edgett. And a seconder, Councillor LeBlanc. I'd ask that you indicate on your screen. Thank you very much. And I believe we can go to the vote.
Steve's is not here.
And
Motion
thank you. Motion passes.
12.3 withdrawal from the general operating reserve, whereas section 101 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers the power on city council to create a general operating reserve fund, and whereas the said act requires that withdrawals be made from the general operating reserve fund be authorized by resolution, and whereas the city treasurer recommends a withdrawal of $700,216 be made from the general operating council contingency reserve consisting of council-approved initiatives from the 2024 year. Therefore, be it resolved that that authorization be granted for withdrawal in the amount of $700,216 be made from the General Operating Reserve Fund.
Thank you. Is there someone who wishes to move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Legier. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kingston? Could you indicate on the screen, please? Thank you. And we may go to the vote. Please indicate. Thank you. Terrific. Motion passes unanimously.
Next is, oops, to the wrong one. What is it? Sorry.
12.4.
Thank you. Deposits to the Utility Capital Reserve. Whereas Section 117.7 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on City Council to create a Utility Capital Reserve Fund, and whereas the said act requires that deposits made to the Utility Capital Reserve Fund be authorized by resolution, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends a deposit to the Utility Capital Reserve Fund in the amount of $1 million be made from the Utility Operating Fund, and therefore be be it resolved that authorization be granted for a deposit in the amount of $1 million be made to the Utility Capital Reserve Fund from the Utility Operating Fund.
Terrific. Thank you. Is there someone who wishes to move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Richard. Seconded by, thank you, Councillor Kingston. I would ask that you indicate on your screen. Thank you. And I believe we can go to the vote. All right. Please indicate on your screen. Excellent. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. One more.
One more, yes. I believe that Councillor Bourgeois has a
Oh, yeah, that's
motion to be read into the record.
Go ahead, Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Résolution pour établir un comité du Conseil.
A resolution to establish a council committee on multiculturalism. Whereas the city of Moncton recognizes 2 official languages and 2 official linguistic communities, but also wants to value the other cultures which contribute to our city's enrichment. Whereas the number of newcomers to the city of Moncton has increased significantly since 2021 and is expected to increase similarly over the next decade. Whereas newcomers contribute to the city's economic development. Whereas most newcomers of the city of Moncton enrich the local community with different cultures, traditions, customs, and perspectives. Whereas the city of Moncton has enacted action plans to address racism and social inclusion, whose implementation would benefit from newcomers' involvement. And whereas the Moncton City Council seeks to bring together newcomers and provide them with the opportunity to contribute to the improvement of the city's actions to enhance the quality of life to all of its citizens.
Be it resolved that the council appoints a committee on multiculturalism. Be it further resolved that the committee's mandate is to provide advice and recommendations to the council on the implementation of measures prescribed in Moncton's social inclusion plan and the recommendations to address racism tabled in October 2022 by the New Brunswick Commissioner on Systemic Racism. Be it further resolved that the Committee on Multiculturalism will collaborate with the Council's Committee on Social Inclusion and the Internal Committee on Diversity, Equity and Inclusion in order to avoid duplication and improve the impact of municipal actions. Be it further resolved that the committee membership includes 7 newcomers. And be it further resolved that the committee files an annual progress report. I so move.
Terrific. Thank you. I do believe that this concludes the final meeting of 2024. I would take a motion. Thank you, Councillor Richard, to adjourn.